We think of our homes and our offices as our safe spaces, right? Our little sanctuaries. But what if I told you the air inside them holds some secrets? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty wild statistic. 90%. That's how much of our time we spend indoors, on average. 90% of our lives, surrounded by four walls.
It seems like a simple question, doesn't it? But the answer, well, the answer is a lot more complicated than you might think. Because the air inside isn't always as fresh and clean as we imagine.
Okay, so let's get right into the heart of it. This invisible threat that's kind of just hanging out in our homes and offices.
Here's the crazy thing about our modern world. We've gotten really good at making our buildings energy efficient. We've sealed them up tight to keep the heat in or the cool in, which is great for our wallets, sure. But it also means we've basically turned our homes into these giant, well-insulated boxes. And once pollutants get inside, they don't really have anywhere to go. They're just trapped in there with us.
And the problem really just boils down to these three things. First, what we're bringing into the space. Second, how well we're getting fresh air to circulate. And third, how we're actually using our buildings. If any of those are out of whack, the air quality can take a nosedive.
All right, so let's put on our detective hats for a second. It's time to figure out who the actual culprits are. What are these pollutants we keep talking about?
So the list of suspects is pretty long, but they mostly fall into these big categories. We've got chemical fumes, living things like mold and bacteria, teeny tiny particles of dust, regular old odors, and even some really dangerous gases like carbon monoxide.
Let's talk about that term off-gas for a sec. VOCs, they're basically these invisible chemical fumes that are slowly leaking out of everyday stuff. You know that new paint smell or a new carpet? Yep, you're smelling VOCs. But they also come from things you might not expect, like the adhesives in your furniture, or even some of the air fresheners we use to try and make our homes smell better.
And then you've got the stuff that's actually alive. We're talking about mold, bacteria, and those pesky dust mites. And all they need to thrive is a little water, a food source, which can just be our own dead skin cells, by the way, and a nice comfy temperature. I mean, does that sound familiar? It's pretty much the perfect description of most of our homes.
And this chart just shows how ridiculously common these things are. Carbon monoxide from a furnace that's not working right, mold from a tiny leak under the sink, dust mites living in our beds, even radon, which is a natural gas that can just seep up from the ground into your house. And the effects? Well, they range from just annoying to, honestly, pretty deadly.
So, and this is the really critical thing to understand, this isn't just about a musty smell or a little bit of dust on the furniture. This stuff can have a real, actual impact on our health. Health experts actually have two different categories for this. On one side, you have something called sick building syndrome. That's when you get headaches or feel tired at work, but the second you leave the building, you feel better. It's frustrating because the cause is often a total mystery. But on the other side, you have building-related illness. And this is different. This is a specific diagnosed disease, like asthma, that can be traced directly back to a contaminant in that building. It's like finding the smoking gun.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the problem. Let's switch gears and talk about solutions, because the good news is there's absolutely a clear plan for making the air we breathe a whole lot better.
And the strategy is actually pretty straightforward. You can think of it as a four-step plan of attack. The absolute best thing you can do is source control. Just don't bring polluting materials into your house to begin with. If you can't do that, the next best thing is to isolate it. Put the office printer in its own room with a fan. Then, on top of that, you add good old-fashioned ventilation and just regular maintenance.
Now, when we talk about getting fresh air inside, it really happens in two ways. There's infiltration, which is the accidental way, air just leaking in through little cracks and gaps. Then there's ventilation, and that's the intentional, on-purpose way of bringing fresh air in. In our super-sealed modern buildings, you just can't rely on the accidental method. You really need a plan for ventilation.
And this right here is the simplest, most elegant example of ventilation. It's called cross-ventilation. You literally just open windows on opposite sides of a room, the wind pushes fresh air in one side and pulls the stale air out the other. How simple is that? It's brilliant.
But just opening a window isn't always enough. What if the air outside is polluted too? Well, that brings us to our final strategy, actively cleaning the air that's already inside.
And this is where a little bit of technology really helps. Air filtration is your next line of defense. It basically uses a physical barrier, a filter, to literally pull the nasty stuff out of the air as it circulates. But here's the thing. Not all filters are created equal. Not even close. Your basic panel filter? That's really just there to stop big clumps of dust from wrecking your furnace. An activated carbon filter is amazing for grabbing gases and smells. But for the really, really tiny stuff, the microscopic particles like bacteria and pollen, you need the heavy hitter.
And that is the HEPA filter. Just look at this thing. It's not a simple screen. It's this incredibly complex, dense web of fibers designed to trap an amazing 99.97% of airborne particles. It is the absolute gold standard for getting those tiny particles out of your air.
So why should you care about any of this? This quote really nails it. Cleaning up our indoor air isn't just about being more comfortable. It's about our health. It's about our ability to think clearly and be productive. So when you look at it that way, taking these steps is one of the smartest investments you can make. So, we've pulled back the curtain on the invisible things in our air, and we've looked at the blueprint for how to fight back. So I'll just leave you with this one question. Now that you know what could be floating around in your own space, what's the first step you're going to take to breathe a little easier?